Welcome to another episode of Hold On, I'm Calling My Mom. I'm Paul.
I'm Barbara.
I love when the guests come on and they're like, "Hi, mom. Can I call you
Yeah.
mom?" Hi, mom. It's really cute. I feel like it fits to the brand.
Yes, I agree.
That is just like a family conversation. We're
That's
just
right.
all connected, going through it.
Make everybody feel comfortable.
You look really pretty today. You have like a glow about you. You look good.
Thank you. It must have been that workout I did. Yeah, I want to start doing the cardiac like I did today. I feel like that's going to boost my stamina because it was like weird for me. I thought it would be good for me to like coordination and stuff too. I was for some reason, just not very coordinated.
I'm not coordinated either. I tell
Yeah, but I
everybody.
used to be, so it kind of scared me today doing it. I was like, she was like, tap toe and then do this and do that and then do that. And I was like, and then
You're like,
she did no, and then she was doing like it's like an old, what the hell is it called?
Taekwondo.
No, like with her feet. She was like, all right, like pretend you're doing jump rope and then do jump rope, pretend and then like do jumping jacks. And I was like, what? Like,
Looks
I
you're like HOTTO.
yeah, it was I was like, yeah, what's that one? Oh my God, I can't think of it now. But anyway, it was
What's it
just
called?
that.
Something that Denise Austin used to do?
No, it's like an
Aerobics?
aerobics thing
Uh,
where you like
on the boxes?
crisscross your legs and you walk,
Hopscotch?
and you pull your arms back. I forget what it's called. Oh my gosh, what the hell is it called?
All I have to say is I'm proud of you for getting up and working out because consistency is key. That is my new motto going into life with anything because I'm like, sometimes I feel like it's all in or nothing. And I'm like, if you just do something every day, you just keep it moving just a little bit,
I
goes a long
agree.
way in the long term. And I'm not gonna lie, I feel like you've been in a little bit of a funk and
I have been.
you've needed to get out and like work out and move your body, good for your mind, because what we tend to do in our household is retreat to like the bed or the couch and watch movies and TV and find comfort. And I know that feels good, but actually that kind of sometimes is like counterproductive and doesn't really help us in the long run.
You're right. Yeah, I agree with that. Like it
Where
takes.
are you too busy Googling something when I'm having a heartfelt moment?
Yeah. I was trying to think of that thing because now it's gonna bug the crap out of me.
What is it?
I don't know.
Well, now
Low
I'm starting.
impact cardio.
Girl, you were about to be in cardiac after that shit. That's why you said it. You're about to be
I
in
was like,
cardiac.
"Oh my god." Yeah, the whole coordination was just so off. I was like, "What the hell?"
Well, I feel like I've been back on the wagon. I've been trying to do good and be consistent, not get so in my head about what I think I should look like. And like I said, just keep moving and doing my thing. Today, I'm kind of like, do it. Like, should today be my off day or not? Like, I hate when I get stressed out about working out. It's not fun when you feel that way. I hate when I feel that way. Like, I
Yeah, it
should
shouldn't
work
be.
out.
It shouldn't be stressful.
Yeah, it is sometimes. So what I did this weekend to counterbalance doing some fun in my life, I was going to say this is very much like the first time you're hearing from me and over the weekend because I saw
Yeah, you did movie-thon.
I saw 4 fucking movies. That AMC pass is living up to its
Movie-thon.
expectations. Let me
Yeah.
tell you, I saw My Old Ass, Speak No Evil with James McAvoy's he looks good in that movie. I saw Wild Robot and I saw Beetlejuice 2, which I was really disappointed in
Really?
Beetlejuice 2. I just was like, I don't it's just such a classic and it's hard. It's like Hocus Pocus. When they did Hocus Pocus 2, I was like, this is bad.
Yeah.
Because they're just so I don't know, I just feel like they're at a different time period, a different caliber, and then sometimes those movies start to feel like they're so kiddie-ish that they lose that kinda, like,
Yeah.
little scary, dark I don't know, it just doesn't feel the same, and
Sometimes
they're
you should just not touch it.
that's how I feel, like, if it's not broke, don't fix it. Beetlejuice and Speak No Evil, totally my movies, like, I know that they're just gonna be fun or not Speak No Evil definitely wasn't fun, but I know it's not gonna be, like, pull at the heartstrings, it's gonna be, like, that suspense kinda
Yeah.
vibe. Sometimes, I don't know about anybody else, but I don't like going into a movie knowing that I'm gonna feel some type of, like, heavy emotion.
Right.
Like, I'm such an emotional person already that, like, I don't need that to then add on to the already heavy emotions that are within me. So, Wild Robot is like this animation movie, which it's like, there's gonna be some, like,
Yeah.
heartfelt journey in it where something's gonna happen and somebody might die, and I'm like, "Oh, this feels heavy."
Yeah, it's a life move. It's a life movie.
And then my old ass, it was one that I was like, "Oh, I wanna see, it's a comedy," but I kept hearing everybody say, "Oh, it's Sydney." Shout out to
It
Sydney.
it's
She
deep.
yeah.
Did you
So,
cry?
bitch, I cried a couple
Nuh-uh!
a couple times throughout that
Did
movie.
you?
Yeah, but I was, like, all in
Like,
the back.
cry, or did you hold it
No,
up?
I just, like, didn't wipe my face because I was all the way in the corner and I didn't want anyone to see because I was like, "Let me have my moment." And they just would start coming down on both sides, and, we went it was me, Jordy, and Carlo, and, like, after the movie, we, like, all because Carlo had to sit next to this guy who was hacking the whole
Shout out
time.
Carlo.
Yeah, shout out Carlo. His ass better be listening to this episode.
That's right.
And he's like, "Oh my god, I was doing the ugly sobbing." Jordy got emotional.
You were, or Carlo said it?
Carlo said that.
Was Jordy emotional
Yeah,
too?
Jordy, like, Jordy leaned over and, like, held my hand. Um,
Aw. Oh,
I
you're gonna
know.
make me cry.
And it was weird because I was like, "I should probably go see these movies and just do it," because I haven't cried in a really long time. Like, I don't know
Yeah.
about you. I mean, you probably did the other day or today right now, but I
No, I
I
agree. I agree.
I was thinking, I was like, "Damn, like, I haven't cried," which is surprising to me because I usually have the moments where it's like I think about I don't know, I'll, like, cry sometimes if I look through, like, a memory on my phone or if I, like, think about you, how much I love you, or, like, bread or, like, my life or something like that, but I actually haven't had it, which is a good thing because
That's a good
sometimes
thing.
I mean, it's good to cry, which I think should be another episode, but I was like, I haven't really had a moment, but I thought in the movie, what really was, like, just sad, it's about, like, the internal dialogue of, like, your older self talking to your younger self,
Yeah.
which I
Which is a
think
question that people ask people. Like,
yeah,
you hear a lot of interview people say, "If you could tell your
your
younger
younger
self,"
self, yeah,
which is a
and
very hard question, I feel like, to answer.
but it was just sad because it was like time is the only thing in the world you can never get back
Preach.
unless somebody maybe dies too. But I don't know. But that's what they said in the movie, so I'm gonna go with it. But because like her older self kept saying, "Be nice to your mom. She's just doing her best and she loves you." And then it made me think of you. And then I started getting emotional because I was like, "I love my mom." And it made me think of like those moments where I was like, "Damn, like." Oh, like you'll just never get that back when you're just like a little bitchy like teenager or something, and you do something that you maybe wouldn't do as an adult, or you would talk a certain way. But then I started thinking
Yeah, but,
afterward,
like, I would have to say on that comment that you and Brett never,
I know.
uh
Well, that's what I was gonna say because in the
yeah,
car when we all regrouped after it, Jordy and Carlo, they were just talking about, being like a teenager and doing that. And I said, to be honest, I know this not to like make me seem like I'm like a perfect child, but I really never had a period where I went through where I like hated my mom.
no.
Like,
You
how
or
some
Brett.
kids go
Mm,
through where they're, like, kinda, like, mean and do that, like, we did
yeah.
have some, like, moments where I'd be like, "I hate you," when I was younger, but, like
Never would say never said you
no, there was
hated
one
me.
time I did say when I was younger, and I remember I felt really bad, and clearly it still leaves a mark on me at 32 years old that I'm still
Oh,
thinking about it.
well, see?
I think I wanted to go to somewhere, and, like, you said no, and our dad, like, you guys were, like, on the couch, and I was like, "I hate you," and I ran upstairs.
Bitch.
Um, but no, I do love you.
Yeah, yeah, I mean, neither one of yous were like that we ever went through, like, a period where we didn't talk, or you would be angry or just go to your
Mm-mm.
room, or you know what I mean? Like, there was never that.
No.
If anything, we were probably all together all the time.
Yeah. But even to that point, I said to both of them that I do feel like my childhood was somewhat different in the way the younger girl in the movie who was the lead actress, her character is like getting ready to go to college and she hates her sibling. It doesn't hate him, but has that like, I don't care. She's in her own world. Her parents call her and she doesn't answer and she's with her friends. And I was like, I never really had that, to be honest, because I was
Mm.
so close with my mom and my brother that we really like did like we always did things
That's what I'm
together.
saying. Like, if anything, we did everything. Like, even when you went to college, we would go up there on the weekends and literally go to
Yeah.
dinner, go to breakfast, sit and hang out at your place. Like, yeah,
Yeah, we always did stuff like that. But I also attribute that too to like, what Brett had gone through with his like cancer journey is that
yeah,
at the age that I was, it really shifted to me. Like it made it seem like in the movie it was all about, oh my God, you have to make sure you do all of these things because you'll never get these things back and life is too short and you don't want to ever miss out on those memories. And I really was like, I feel good kind of knowing that I'm like, I never felt that way because my mind then kind of warped to think that like every minute we had with someone that we love could be their last. So I
yeah.
feel like we always did live in a kind of maybe it was anxiety ridden too, but I would always live my
Yeah,
life.
well, and also I feel like, you were 16, Brett was 12. So maybe, if in a better circumstance that he didn't have that cancer journey at that time, then maybe, I don't know, maybe the dynamics would have been different. I
No,
don't
I'm
know.
I'm maybe, I don't know, but we kinda always were very close growing up,
Yeah,
so I
you can
can't
cut that
imagine.
part out. Cut that part out.
Why?
I don't like that
Why?
because it makes sense.
No, it's okay. We're getting on the tangent.
Well, I
Um,
know, but like, to say something like, "Well, if you didn't have it, maybe you guys would have hated each other."
yeah, true.
Cut.
I wanna keep that in now.
No,
Why?
no, because that's horrible to like, what the hell was I thinking? Say that. I was trying to make like a point of something, and then at some point, I'm like, "Oh yeah, if you didn't have cancer, you guys would have hated each other."
It's alright. You're still in delirium after your aerobics workout today, so it's alright. Your brain's not functioning correctly.
What a bonding moment, though, to have with your friends and your boyfriend to watch a movie like that and then go into and then afterwards be able to discuss it.
I know.
Like,
It's
that's really, you know what I mean? Yeah, that's very touching, like, what a bonding moment for people to have.
right? I know, it was
Yeah,
nice to be able to do that. Well, I was like, I love that,
that
and
your
I feel
friend was able to talk about something, Jordy was able to talk about something, like,
we were all able to
it stirred up emotions for each of you.
yeah,
You were able to express why what's the word? Remnant? No.
reminisce.
No, like,
Resonate?
resonate it. Yeah.
Yes.
That's
There you
the
go. Girl, we need to get you some water. Are you alright?
Why it
Well,
resonated with each of you. So that was like that's a nice bonding moment. Like, I could think of you guys all sitting there talking about it.
if that's not a testament to a healthy relationship, I don't
Yeah.
know what is.
Right?
Which I'm sure we can dive into with Dr. Janie, who is going to be joining us today. Dr. Janie Lacy. She is a trauma relationship expert. People may know her and be familiar with her work on 90 Days, The Last Resort. She's created such a space and platform really talking about signs of knowing, hey, is a relationship not healthy, red flags, toxic relationships, which I'm sure so many people can resonate with and understand. And I think, anybody would be lying if they said at some point in their life they weren't in a relationship where it may have been toxic or it was a toxic relationship.
Right.
With that being said, let's welcome Dr. Janie.
Hi, Paul. Hi, Mom.
Hi.
Hey, so happy to be here.
My mom, I know she's already like stewing with things to talk to you about, going to dive into toxic signs in relationships, which I know you're an expert. And, I told you, me and my mom have so many questions about this because, like many people, we have been in relationships where it's like, why the F did I not see this 5 years ago? Right. Like, everybody said this and I didn't listen. So I'm sure you can add a lot of enlightenment into our lives and everybody else who's listening.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm the CEO and the founder of a full counseling center in the Orlando area called Life Counseling Solutions. And we have 8 therapists and we all specialize in different in different areas. But my specialty in particular is dealing with helping women in particular to heal and to recover from toxic relationships so they can thrive not only in their love, their life, but also in their businesses. Being an entrepreneur and being a business owner, I have a heart for a lot of women that are entrepreneurs. But the mental health space has been an area that I really feel strongly about, because growing up in a family system where you don't share problems outside your home, and not understanding that mental health is different than mental illness. A lot of people can interchange both of those. So I have a heart to help people find their why. And part of that is removing the blocks that prevent them from truly living the life that they deserve. And a lot of that has to do with our toxic relationships, our untreated mental illness, and our core beliefs that usually are in our unconscious mind.
Yeah, we've talked about that on the podcast here where, my mom, not to talk about her age because I know she's not a fan of it, but like that, her generation, particularly very much whatever happens in the household, you keep it in the household, you sweep it under the rug, you don't talk about it. And I said, it's funny, as her child, I'm like literally the poster child of the complete opposite, where I'm like, we're talking about everything. I want to know
everything and beat it to death.
Breaking generational curses, that's what I call it. Breaking those patterns.
It is. It is. I get it. I get it. Yeah.
I'm trying, Dr. Janie. I'm trying. I think everybody can agree. When you grow up in a household, you see your parents as an example of like what essentially you kind of think is the ideal, like what you're looking for love, or you're kind of used to that. So sometimes I think people chase things that they've seen because it's just all they know, but it's not technically correct or healthy. You being an expert in, navigating toxic relationships, what are the common signs of toxic relationships? For me, for example, in my household, my mom and dad didn't have the healthiest relationship. I mean, my mom more so did, but my dad wasn't really the one that made it healthy. Mm-hmm. And I think, that can make people very hypersensitive of like either going one or two ways. You always are like, I want to make sure I stay completely away from that person that's anything like my parent that I don't want to be, or you actually chase the chaos where you're just used to that and you always want that in your life in some way or form.
Yeah, and that's a good statement, Paul, because sometimes people think, as you said, that they're running from the what they've seen. But sometimes what I also find is that if we don't understand what we're running to, we can create the very thing that we think we're running from. Or to your point, is that you can create the very thing that you do come from. So when it comes to just finding yourself in toxic relationships, there's some hallmarks. And the challenge that I also see, Mom and Paul, is that movies and music and, yes, coming from the world of reality shows, all these things spotlight unhealthy, toxic relationships. And I understand because it makes for good television. But what that also does is it normalizes what relationships should look like. So when we look at the masters and disasters of relationship, there are some hallmarks that disasters have every single time they come into the office. And I like to kind of break it down so people can remember it in the 3 C's, right? So one, we're going to see a lot of control in that relationship. And it's usually, if we kind of put it in a dynamic, you have someone that, and when I say abuser, doesn't necessarily mean they're physically abusing someone. It's emotionally and mentally. So that you have an abuser and then usually have a victim. And sometimes there could be mutual abuse, but there's usually some level of control in that relationship. And then we see competition. Competition is going to be maybe the one-upping, or let's say you think you really look nice. They're going to find the 3rd C, criticism, right? There's going to be some type of criticism and conflict. So when you have all 3 of those C's that are constantly flowing in that relationship, that's the basics of what a toxic relationship looks like. But when you get into the actual relationship, and we see a lot of these things on TikTok and Instagram that's throwing around a lot of these words, but there is a lot of basis to it, right? So we're seeing the gaslighting. The gaslighting is someone's that really knows that there's truth to what you're saying, but they're going to make you think that your reality is not based in truth. And then we'll see manipulation, we'll see lower self-esteem, and you really see the basic of what a healthy relationship should be, is that 2 people are coming together because they're looking to help each other to grow, and it's creating a place of safety and growth. But where a toxic relationship, there's no room for personal growth, there's no room for autonomy. So you'll see the opposite of that in particular. And when we see people that are coming into our office, we'll see relationally that they have higher rates of anxiety, higher rates of depression, right? There's this decrease of overall feeling self-esteem and self-worth. This is where addictions can also come into play because they're self-medicating to maintain the relationship. So there's probably a lot more I can say about that. But if we kind of break it down to some of those common signs, I like to tell people to think about those C's, right? Looking at that conflict, that competition, and that control, and that criticism throughout the relationship.
Well, just to go back to like what you were saying too, like with the TV shows, how they, make everything so toxic and everything. I think on the other spectrum, they also show and social media these perfect marriages. Everybody like it's perfect all on the outside. And that's what you want to show everybody, right?
Barbara, when I see that sometimes, especially when on social media, I actually know some of the couples, right? So my social media is a public and I use it for informational purposes only. But sometimes I recognize the people who follow me and I know what their relationship really looks
Right.
like. Curated messaging. So when we get caught up into that and then you see hashtag couples goals and all this nonsense, right? I think there is this fantasy that can be created by constantly curating and constantly consuming certain messaging. And then in the hallmark of toxic relationships, right, there's sometimes this dynamic where when the couple is coming in, and it does not matter to me if they are same sex or heterosexual relationships, it's the same dynamic that occurs. And what happens is that there's this fantasy that someone has this image of what the other partner should be doing and being, and they're constantly trying to match that person up to this image, and that's where the criticism comes into play. So the greater the distance between reality and the fantasies, the greater the disappointment in relationships. And we see that all the time, especially when it comes to social media. People will say, well, such and such, it looks like they have a great relationship, and they're consuming all of this. So we are inundated with those messages of what we think it should look like.
Right. Keeping up with the Joneses.
It's an old saying, but it's still true. Everyone's trying to get up to that fake relationship.
Right. Let's call it what it is, right?
Absolutely.
So Dr. Janie, so if somebody's getting in a relationship, say, they're kind of past the honeymoon phase, things are kind of maybe becoming a little bit more real. The common signs of toxic relationships, that maybe if they feel something in their gut that they're like, oh, something's off, they should be looking out for those 3 C's that you mentioned.
I think one of the things that I will often see is exactly what you mentioned, and we can't really talk about it without talking about why it exists. And that's that people question their own intuitive nature. So sometimes they can feel something that, something's not right, or, he said this, but it feels like he's that, or there's something. And then what people will say is that they come in, like, I just need the proof. I just need the evidence. And then they stay longer in these relationships because they're just looking for the evidence or the proof that what they think is happening is happening. But when you see even getting that little bit of a sign, that's kind of a little alarm bell that says, pay attention here. But when we go back to childhood, never to blame our childhood, but to understand why we are the way that we are. In that sense, if we were in a situation where we were constantly told where kids are seen and not heard, or I'm going to give you something to cry about, where our voice was constantly put down or suppressed, you're not going to just wake up one day as a 35-year-old, 45-year-old, or 55-year-old and think, oh, I'm going to be able to recognize these alarm bells, when you've had the foundation of your life tell you that everything else outside of you is right and you're wrong. So there has to be some level of unlearning some of that stuff, because if not, then people are going to constantly be looking for the evidence. And then that's how they can contribute their own toxic behavior in a relationship, is they can create narratives in their mind, and then they start looking for evidence of the narratives that may or actually may not be true. Because if we had trust issues with previous relationships, and now if you're in a relationship, let's say, for example, and you're out at a restaurant and your partner turns over his phone, and that was just one action, you immediately can have an alarm bell that says, oh, he must be hiding something, because your past relationship where someone actually was cheating on you was constantly hiding their phone, constantly turning on, and now you're taking that projection right on into that new relationship. So that doesn't just mean that sometimes our our feelings can be coming from a trauma response and not necessarily an intuitive response. So, doing your own work and healing from your own stuff can also be a way to prevent yourself from staying in long-term toxic relationships, because you'll know, okay, well, this is from my place of trauma. I have no reason not to trust Paul. There's nothing that will show me just because of
Right.
that action. I just know that it was a triggering moment for me, and I could put it in its little box, right? So that's where self-awareness, previous work, and being able to work out those things in that moment, where Paul may not even know that I was thinking that, oh my
Right.
goodness, was it was because I worked it out in here. Where the toxic person who's contributing their own behavior, who has not healed, just moved on, is going to now obsess about that. Is going to look at that phone, and now every time Paul's on his phone, every time he's turning it over, I'm creating a narrative, and I'm going to try to get in his phone. I'm creating something that may not even exist. So sometimes just because someone has that intuitive nature doesn't necessarily mean it's truly intuition. That's based off of regulation. It's based off of facts. It could be based off of, I'm not healed, and I'm bringing my
Yeah.
trust baggage right onto the new relationship.
Yeah.
That's interesting that you said that, because when you mentioned originally the three C's, you mentioned competition, competitiveness. That's one that kind of stands out to me in a previous relationship that I was in, where it was like no matter what I did, whether it was like, somebody thought I was attractive or something in my career, instead of being like a hype person and being like, oh, my significant other is attractive.
Instead of feeling good about what you just accomplished, it turned into a conversation of making them feel better. Is that what you're
Yes.
saying? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, there you go. And that's one of the signs, is that you're thinking to yourself inside, well, this should be something that they should be happy about. Or let's say that Paul was to bring home something that he was excited about with work, or got some promotion that they can the surface be excited about, but later find out it could be an underhanded criticism. It can be, well, I think you should have deserved that probably about a year ago. And you're kind of thinking, well, I think it sounds like a compliment, but is it really like these backhanded type things? That's also how
Yeah.
competition can
Right.
show up in relationships.
Yeah. That backhand. Yeah.
Mhm.
If I'm in a relationship, if I'm feeling not the best about myself and someone says my significant other is attractive or they look good, I'm like, yeah, like you want to be your significant other's biggest hype person. Like that's how I view it. Cause to me, I'm
Yeah.
like, why would you not? So that was like a very weird thing to always navigate. Cause I was like, damn, I'm feeling good about myself. And now it's like, I kind of have to make this person feel better for something that I should feel good about, you know?
And then
Yeah.
you start making yourself smaller over time. And that's what happens in a toxic relationship, because then you start holding back. And that's how you make yourself smaller and smaller. And that's how people get into these relationships where then they get trauma bonded. It's then hard to leave because they lose their sense of worth. They lose their sense of self esteem, because you're constantly suppressing to try to make someone else happy or to consider the other person. And then it becomes harder and harder. And that's why I always tell people that, to not necessarily judge people when we can see on the outside clearly that relationship isn't healthy, but the longer you stay in it, the harder it gets to leave. And it's more because of the psychological bond that occurs in that relationship.
Now, let me
Yeah.
ask you, because you
Yeah.
said that, because I know Barb's going to jump in because she's got something to say. But I'm wondering now in my head, is that people's misunderstanding or misconception of love is actually that they're in a trauma bond and they don't realize? Like for my own example, I was with somebody it was the first person I was ever with. It was like a big part of my life. And I'm sure, obviously, I have love for that person. But over time, I was like, I'm not in love with this person. But I stayed in it thinking, well, like, we just been through so much. We love each other. But I'm like, is it because you kind of build that trauma bond? Like maybe it's a misconception. Maybe you really don't love that person.
Right. What is the difference between being in love and being in a trauma bond relationship?
And that's where we need to get down to the basics of the definition of love, right? But when you
Yeah.
ask people the definition of love, a lot of people will base it off of feelings. And feelings is not necessarily love, right? It's also going to be defined by respect, by care, by kindness, right? By help, right? We can really break down the definition of that. But when we operate from society that I'm in love with that person, what we're feeling is all the chemicals in our body. I mean, that's what you're feeling, like the in love feeling. And that's not made to last, right? That's just made to be attracted to someone. And we can confuse attraction for love. And then what we're talking about as far as the love and staying in relationship, people will tell me all the time, is because I love that person. No, you're attached to that person. So we kind of look at it from an attachment theory standpoint. Healthy love says, well, I love this person and I truly would like to be in a relationship with them, but I also understand that in order to be in this relationship with this person, I have to give up myself, I have to make myself smaller. I'm constantly self-serving them, and it's toxic in the sense of we're criticizing, we're not growing this relationship, so I can walk away. Someone who's attached from an anxious standpoint has a fear of abandonment. So when that person, they start getting into these toxic type dynamics, what I'll see a common way people respond to that is fawning. Fawning is basically they become people pleasing. Well, maybe if we have more sex, maybe if I'm cooking more, maybe if I don't, offer. So you're constantly trying to change yourself and mold yourself, and I call pretzel yourself, to try to meet that other person's demand. And that's going to be an empty well. But it's
Right,
usually
because it's never ending. It's never
never.
to their expectations.
The goalposts will continue to move.
Yeah.
But that's why people will stay, because they're attached, and that's not love. That's from the attachment basis, which usually happens from childhood. The dominant ones we'll see is an avoidant and an anxious, and that's the dynamic that will normally be attracted to each other. The avoidant seems very present in the beginning, which is why the anxious person gets confused. The avoidant comes on very strong. I tend to think of the movie Gone Girl, where Ben Affleck's character in the beginning of Amy, like they're meeting in a bar for the first time, and he says to her, "Well, I'm the one that's going to come save you," and she falls in love with him at that time. And we know from that movie, in that book, that they had a toxic relationship.
Yeah.
But
Just a little.
just a little bit. But Ben Affleck's character, I think his name was Nick in there. He's an avoidant, right? But people, I use that example because he came on so strong in the beginning. So people like the anxious person, they love that because the intensity of it. But then there's like the bait and switch. The anxious person is constantly chasing the avoidant because it's like a come here, go away. And then as soon as the avoidant starts kind of looking at the anxious person, turns around metaphorically and is there, and they feel smothered. And there's this toxic dance that happens, which is why I believe every single one of us needs to understand our attachment style, because that's going to dictate who we're going to be attracted to, why we stay in these relationships. And usually the anxious person has a fear of abandonment, and an avoidant person has a fear of engulfment. And it's usually, excuse us moms here, it's sometimes usually because of mom. It's usually because of a mom figure where we can be overbearing. There's no boundary. So then that little kid, that little boy, little girl grows up and they're having no autonomy. So in a relationship, if someone kind of feels that way unconsciously, they're going to push away. I don't want to be controlled. I don't want to answer your questions. And then, we see that over and over and over again. But I can tell the type of relationship someone's going to be in based off of their attachment style. And it's not love, it's attachment.
Is there what kind of different?
At my mom. I'm like, girl, she's speaking to you so heavy right now.
Is there what are the different attachment styles? Is that a lot to go into, or?
Well, it is a lot to go into, but basically, right, we all want to be secure. And 5% of the research from the Gottman Institute says 5% of the people come from secure families. So the rest of us, including us three here, will come from the other side, right? Where we have to work, we have to grow, we got to put in the work to break the generations. But we have the anxious, we have the avoidant, and then we have the disorganized. But all three of those types, most of us, so I would put myself in the anxious category, my unhealed self, the ambivalent type meaning based off of who you're in a relationship with. You can be an avoidant or you can be an anxious, right? So it's kind of like the hokey pokey dance, but doing the work to get to a secure place takes 3 pillars is what I would talk about. And I did my TEDx talk actually on that, but where we're doing our mind, our body work, our mind work, and our inner child work. And we have to do all 3. And I'm a big believer, Barbara and Paul, that 50% is somatic work. It's in our body. Our body remembers things that our mind does not. Yeah. So we have to constantly be doing things to release all that trauma in our body. We can't, and I'm saying this as a psychotherapist, you can't just sit on someone's couch and keep talking about the same problem over and over and over again. You're not going to solve it. You're just going to re-traumatize yourself.
Right.
That's literally, I shifted into cognitive behavioral therapy, because I felt like I got to a point where I was like just doing what you were saying. I'm on someone's couch and I'm just talking about this. And I'm like, no. I need to like do the work. I want to fix why this is this. Like I need to homework, I need to do this. and apply
Yeah.
it to my life and work on it every week.
It's talk, do the
Yes.
work.
The
Yeah.
talking part is acknowledging it and being able to speak your story. Because if we can't even speak what has happened to us, we're not going to be able to deal with it. We're not going to be able to heal from it. So being able to speak it where it has less effect on you over time. So it is important to be able to speak about it, but that can't just be where we stop at.
Is love bombing like something to be, is that a big red flag also?
We could probably do a whole show on love bombing. Because what I'll quickly say about that is that when people are manipulators and they want their target, I'll call the person who they see has some benefit that they want. They're not coming into that relationship genuine and honest and authentic. They're coming with a purpose. So what they'll do, to kind of put it in practical terms, is they move very quickly, very early on. And it's not necessarily that they're buying you gifts and buying flowers. It can be that they've learned, Barbara, enough, because us, and I'm gonna use heterosexual typical language. You can send me emails later, but us women talk too much, right? So you're talking, and you're telling all these things where you should have discernment, boundaries, and need to know basis. So they study you. They study you, and then they understand all the things that Barbara needs in her life right now. So the love bombing becomes a target. It's not about the flowers, because people think it's about the flowers. He's buying me gifts. No, it's about, if Barbara's saying that she's a single mom and she's raising this boy all by herself and she needs help, that love bomber is going to be coming. He's going to be changing light bulbs. He's going to be fixing things. And then Barbara's going to be on the phone with her girlfriend, like, oh my goodness, I cannot believe I found the man of my dreams.
Yeah.
Right. And then before you know it, you are attached, you're swept off your feet, you're in fantasy, and then he sweeps the carpet from underneath your feet. So it happens very quickly because they study you, because most people who find themselves on the receiving end, and I'm saying this generally,
Yeah.
is because there's no boundaries. There's not a level of healing and security. So you don't understand that we feel like home. You meet someone like, oh my goodness, I feel like I've known him. So then you're like vomiting at the mouth, and you're telling him why you broke up with the last person, what you need, and they're taking in, it's like collecting data in order to manipulate you. And that's love bombing in its most practical terms, because people think it's always about the flowers and the gifts. No, it's about, they're studying what Paul needs, and they're studying what Janie needs, they're studying what Barbara needs, and that the love bombing will look different for each of us, because it's what we need.
Yeah.
Dr. Janie, while you're talking, the thing that really stood out to me the most was that I mean, we know in America, divorce is rampant. Like, we know most marriages, unfortunately, end in divorce statistically. I don't know. I know we don't have a, specific couple to say this, but I'm starting to think now, how many people are truly in love with each other, or how many people are really trauma bonded with each other, honestly? Like, that's where my head
That's a
starts
good
to go.
question. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not one of those people who gets excited by people that say, oh, we've been married for 20, 30, 40 years. And I'm probably a little jaded, I will tell you that, right? Because I've worked with lots of couples, including currently, where people have been married for a very, very long time, and they are not necessarily healthy. So we
Yeah.
celebrate all these milestones, which can be good enough themselves. But does that really mean that they're happy, that they're healthy? Does that mean that they're secure? No, it just means, especially from, I look at kind of having my foot above the baby generation and the newer generation kind of being in the middle, right? Is that I know in the baby boomer generation, a lot of people were committed to being committed. Or especially if you bring in religion into the conversation, people will they will cherry pick things, like from a Christian perspective. Well, God hates divorce. Well, God also hates abuse, right? So they kind of like they cherry pick these things to make it validate why they're staying in their relationship, which is completely unhealthy. So people are trauma bonded. People have a fear of abandonment. There is a lot of power dynamics that occurs, where there's lots of couples that stay together. It's more of a parent-child relationship, where, more stereotypical. It's usually used to be where husbands would go and be in the workplace, and a wife would be at home with the children, and he's the breadwinner. But we're actually seeing it change a little bit now. We're seeing women being the breadwinners and men being the actually ones that are being financially dependent. So we're seeing that change dramatically in that sense. So I always say to not necessarily get happy and think your goal is to be married 20 or 30 or 40 years. It's to be happy and healthy in your own skin, and you find a partner who brings out the best in you, and you can bring out the best in that person. But that also means at some point in time, when there's an expiration date to that relationship, you're also okay with uncoupling, because you also know that that's what would be good for you, versus being able to say, I've been with this person for 30 or 40 years. And I love those couples. I have them in my family. So I'm not saying that's not necessarily a
Yeah.
bad thing, but that can't be the only criteria.
Agreed.
Right. And I mean, especially I would even go like as in age wise, you know, I won't say my age, but a couple of years ago when I decided to make the move, you know, at being in the 50s, it's, you know, that's a big thing because now you're at that other half of your life and you're like, oh, that's not what I thought. And now here I am alone. How am I going to manage that and be happy? And you know what I mean? Because in my head, like that's a hard thing to be then again in your 50s, being like, oh, I got to start this all over. How does this work?
I think the best thing for Barbara or anyone else in their 50s is to be a good steward over your single season, right? To really rock it, have fun, continue to do your work, because then you get to a place, and I'm speaking to myself too, speaking to all the single people, right? In the sense that you get to a place where you don't need someone in your life, you desire them. And having someone from that type of place versus a need, or I'm afraid of being alone, or I'm getting older, these types of things, you're more likely to pick the right person when it's from a place of desire and not from a place of need. Because there are so many women I'm working with that are picking from that place of need in their 50s, and now again looking again in their 60s.
Right.
So be a good steward of your single season, enjoy your life, be happy, find contentment and a good handyman, right? And then when it's time to settle down, you are coming from a place of discernment, a place of, and I always say, especially if you've already been married, right? Like I have, you down from a place of respect versus I have to love this person and feel right. You have wisdom and
Yeah.
experience to now make a better decision that can last for the long term.
Yeah.
Well, I kind of feel like, for my example of like, my experience is that I saw my mom and my dad, not have a healthy relationship. And, I got into a relationship. I came out, right before I like went into this really long term with this relationship. And I kind of had that idea, well, you kind of just always take the good and the bad with the person, like kind of what I saw in my mom and my dad. You just stick around with someone's bad behavior because you're committed to them. And I felt like I kind of used that in a way where at some point it just shifted in me where I was like, I'm young. I can't be 50 years old and be, excuse my language, but fucking miserable with this person. Like, I'm like, I want to be happy, and I kind of felt like I actually used what I didn't like, but I was accustomed to use it in my advantage to be like, I need to break away. Mind you, it took a while to fully break it off. It was like this kind of, like little parts it chipped away at, but it eventually happened. But as you're talking too, I start to think, I think the scariest thing for most people is to really get away from that person because you just share memories with that person
Yes.
and you build like a life with them. But I think from what you're saying and what I'm taking away is like, you have to learn to separate the memories, the good times, but like that shouldn't override all the unfortunate tears, heartbreaks,
Yeah.
and like trials and tribulations that you're enduring.
And that's an excellent point, because what people do is they compartmentalize. Well, this person has all these good parts and they just hold on to that and they make excuses for the bad parts, versus they can have these good parts and there's an and these bad parts. And
Yeah.
these bad parts, even though, yes, they have all these good parts, these bad parts, so to speak, are detrimental to my being. They're detrimental to my mental health. Sometimes it's physical health. And these circumstances. So once you get to that place to recognize that we are integrated whole being, we're not into parts. And in that situation, that's where you can make informed decisions. But it's hard for people to make informed decisions when they don't feel like they're worthy of making those decisions. So I always tell people before they make a decision, like when they say, should I stay or should I go? And they're looking to us as therapists for an answer, is the first thing before we even approach that is start working on you.
Yeah.
Is building a sense of understanding what your core beliefs are and why you believe that way, so that we can, like a tree, we can tear out those roots and plant something new that's going to be fulfilling to your future. And then once you understand your core beliefs and why they're there, then you can now relearn and unlearn some things. and then start building self-esteem and self-worth. Because if people make impulsive decisions to leave relationships, the percentage that they will be back in that relationship with the same person is higher, or someone that is similar to them. So the first thing is always kind of just doing your work, because that self-awareness piece is going to be key. As you were mentioning in your own story, is that you like woke up and said, oh, I don't want to be miserable. I'm in my 50s, what I'm seeing. So what do I need to do to start chipping away to make sure it doesn't happen? And you said something that's very profound that I want your listeners to hear, is that it's a process. You made a decision. It doesn't necessarily mean the next day you're going to wake up and you're going to be in this healthy relationship. It's a process. You have to kind of go through this
Yeah.
process to get to the other side. And I think a lot of people don't realize that just because you leave a relationship doesn't mean you left the relationship. You still have work to do after you leave the relationship. And that's going to take a lot of work. Boundaries is not, we joke about it, right? But it's not easy, because boundaries comes from a place of self-worth. The first time you get in a relationship and they raise their voice a little bit and you're like, oh, it didn't feel good. But if you don't say anything in that moment, then that's going to also demonstrate
Okay.
your self-worth. And saying something doesn't mean you have to come out, because people always, they hear this and they think they have to be aggressive. No, it could be, hey, Paul, I really want to hear what you have to say, but your tone right now is just distracting me a little bit. Can you say that again? Right. And then you watch how people
That's a really nice way to say it, because I definitely would not say it that way. I'd be like, you gotta pump the brakes and take it down a little bit.
Oh, you're seeing probably about 3 decades of work here.
Yeah.
So, but once you kind of put the boundary down in a kind, loving, and then you watch how people respond, right? But that you cannot do that, to our point, whether it's coming to pump the brakes or it's coming from a kind place. You can't do that unless we understand that we're worthy of respect.
Yeah.
And it's not an ideal, but you're walking that out. And that's where that process comes into play, is that you have to really take a step back, and it's to never blame a victim, right? Because there truly are, and you've probably either done a podcast on this or should, but narcissistic abusive relationships in particular are very different than just dysfunctional, just toxic relationships. Narcissistic abusive relationships are toxic, but not every toxic relationship is a narcissistic abusive relationship. But those relationships are the hardest for people to leave, because they can come to therapists or they can come to podcasts, and they're hearing information that can relate to healthy people that do not have personality disorders. And you can't slap that on a narcissistic abusive relationship and think it's going to work, which is why people then start, well, maybe we need to learn how to communicate. Maybe we need to do these other things. It doesn't work when you're dealing with someone that has we have NPD, narcissistic personality disorder. And then we have those that have high narcissistic traits. So if they have high narcissistic traits or personality disorder, these conversations, as far as having boundaries, communicating, doesn't work in those dynamics. So I want to make that clear, because I get conversations and questions all the time. And when I look at their relationship, I can clearly see that there is other things going on versus just some toxic traits that are happening in the relationship. They have to get help.
We went to therapy. Well, he went to therapy. It wound up becoming, the therapist wanted to see us together, to that he walked out and I was there. Like he walked out of, it was his therapist.
That
wanted
sounds
me
about
there.
right. Sounds about right.
Yep, but that's control, right? So those that are listening, that is an example of someone gets upset and I got to leave, or or they're walking out on a conversation, you're in home. When they're leaving, that's them taking control. And it's usually the person that's left is usually has the abandonment issues, because you're thinking, well, maybe I shouldn't have said that, or you're replaying and blaming yourself. And the whole time, that person you cannot change, right? Because those going to be those dynamics, especially if they had any level of narcissistic tendencies. They're going to make you think you're crazy, or you're too sensitive. Why do you keep bringing this up again? Why can't you get over it? You can't forgive me, right? All that type of stuff.
Yeah, pretty much. You kind of nailed that one.
I was going to say, that spoke to me. But let me ask you, Dr. Janie, so, somebody's feeling all of these things. They have that gut intuitive, feeling like I did, my mom did at one point. Instead of them waiting maybe all this time, and I don't think maybe any time is wasted, it's all a learning experience, but maybe to help somebody get out a little bit sooner of this toxic relationship, what are your biggest tips or suggestion to be like, here's how to maybe start moving the needle and getting this going, as opposed to, feeling that and not doing anything about it for years.
Absolutely. The very first step is they have to just acknowledge that they're in a toxic relationship. They have to acknowledge what is the reality, because we like to, and I'm saying we, those that have experience in toxic relationships, like to stick their head in the sand. So you have to be in a place where you can acknowledge the pain and the trauma, and that this is what it is. This is what it is. Not trying to excuse it away, not trying to do anything. The first part is acknowledgement. And then the second part, especially if it's a long term, if it's even over a year, is they have to get some type of help. And I'm not saying this is from a therapist, but I just know those that have been successful have had help along the way. So that can be therapy, that can be coaching. Get someone on the process that understands toxic relationships and unhealthy versus healthy, and also has personal experience in that, right? Because you need someone that can really give you the guidance to move through it, because it's healing is not linear. It's going to be like a zigzag. So you need someone that can help you with compassion, self-forgiveness, and self-care in that process. And as you can hear me, my response is not even getting to a place of leaving yet. Those are going to be important steps. And if people can't necessarily like afford a therapist or get, depending on their circumstance, they can start journaling the reality of what happened, because they have to keep themselves grounded. So when I said this, he said I was too sensitive, or when I said this, he pushed me, right? If you had some level of journaling it, because when the person is ready to leave, on the other hand, that's where we have what we call euphoric recall. And we know precisely after 2 weeks on average of leaving a toxic relationship, euphoric recall sets in. You start thinking about, well, maybe it was me, or I remember that time he gave me flowers, or I remember that time I was sick with COVID. You're starting to go back to all those good times. And that is the time where you start potentially are vulnerable to coming back. So journaling on the process, because in that moment, we have you going back and reading why you left. You have to stay grounded into that reality.
Yeah.
Most people who have successfully left with not a lot of attempts, they've had it documented to keep them grounded when they were going back to the flowers and the lovemaking and all the euphoric recall of the things that were happening. So self-care is going to be important. Having a community is going to be important. And then depending on people's situations financially, separating, getting your emergency fund, start getting your affairs in order. And these are things that need to happen before you even leave. And the reason why I say that's important is because when you leave, you're going to be so emotionally triggered, trauma. So doing all this other stuff is just going to cause more confusion. So getting your ducks in a row, which you should anyway, financially, thinking about your career, getting community support, getting potential therapy, journaling, doing things of self-care, all of that stuff is going to help. So on the other side, when you actually make the decision to leave, it's not an impulsive decision. Most people leave toxic relationships impulsively. They scorch the earth. It's called reactive abuse. You get to a place where you just had enough. You're taking, and then it could just be one thing. And then you're like, I am done. I am not dealing with this anymore. And then you scorch the earth and you're making an impulsive decision to leave. You're grabbing stuff. That person's going to return to that relationship, because now they're going to think,
I did.
Okay, so I'm thinking your story.
As you're going, I'm like, check. I left for a year and I went right back. Yep.
And we can predict that, because most people
yes, to me though, I didn't predict that. I was like, I'm done. And then like you said, 2 weeks later, I was like,
well, of course you didn't predict it. I'm like, girl, you got Dr. Janie, who's got the doctoral degree to say, I knew that was going to happen. That's
why I like you kind of just validated me for the first time. So thank you. Yeah,
absolutely. And have compassion for yourself, because believe me, Miss Barbara, you are not the only one. That's why we know. So that's why I'm saying it has to be a planned, methodical. You're doing the work before you even make a decision, because when we scorch the earth, we will be back with our tail between our legs. And even though you may have been the one being abused, you're going to be the one apologizing, right? So that's where the shame comes into play. When there are certain things that keeps people in toxic relationships, the shame, there's guilt, there's pity, right? So all these types of things that are self-felt push you right back into the arms of the person who could never love you the way that you deserve to be loved. And all of those types of things. So before someone is even thinking about leaving, they're in a relationship right now and they're saying, I know this relationship isn't healthy for me. Start just doing one step at a time. Start journaling, get a therapist, start documenting certain things, start looking at your finances. If you were to move out in 6 months, what would be the possibility? Just start thinking about it without making any decisions at all, because you're more likely to be set up for success if you do all of those things before you make a decision.
I
Yeah.
second that.
We
Yeah,
learned from
and
experience.
You have the credentials, but I'm just seconding that.
but that was really Barb's big. I remember her leading up to it was definitely about like, am I going to be okay? Am I going to be able to support myself? How am I going to live in a life different than what I'm used to? And I think that's like what you're saying, Dr. Janie. A lot of women or people in
Well,
general, that's
yeah. And I was very young. We were together at 15
Hmm.
and I did not leave till I was 50. So
So that a trauma bond and attachment was strong. It was
Yeah.
strong.
yeah. Like once we met, that was it. We were never apart. That was just, yeah.
And
Yeah.
sometimes those relationships are the ones that we celebrate 30 or 40 or 50 years. But the time that they got attached, they got together, there's usually some hallmarks we'll see. Sometimes it's to escape home life. And then sometimes it's to kind of think that you're in love when we don't even know who we are at 15, 18,
Yeah.
25, right? We don't even know who we are, but yet, we think we found, and that's why I do not like these terms, Paul. Twin flames, the love of my life, my soulmate. No, you may find 5 soulmates in your life. It's not just one. But we get so grained on these beliefs, and that keeps so many people stuck and trying to fix and build a bear, the IKEA effect. You're trying to build them to be what you want. I mean,
Or think you can change them.
Yes. The magical thinking. You have the power. If you love them, sex them, have food, twist yourself.
I can change them. I'm everything they need. I can do it.
Yep.
Yeah.
You become their God.
for people who really believe like, hey, this person is, I'm seeing all the signs, they're so toxic. I think everybody has hope that you want to salvage your relationship, your marriage. There's something there that you can make it work. Are there people who just, unfortunately, are just toxic relationship daters that, or marriages that just bop from relationship, marriage, that are just toxic, and that's just who they are? They're never going to change.
Yes. And I'll tell you what people can look out for. But even though we know that, it's still hard when we love someone, we're in a relationship with them. So I have a lot of compassion for people when I say this. But if someone truly has higher narcissistic traits, covert, you probably need to do a show on this, really. But the covert narcissists are the ones that go under the radar, because we think about narcissists, we think of the grandiose, that they're coming in and we know that they're coming. No. It's the covert narcissists who go below the radar, people trying to constantly change them because there's these good parts to them. So, if you're looking anywhere on the narcissistic spectrum, I'm talking about high traits, personality disorder, the likelihood that that person will change is going to be low to no. But a hallmark that you can kind of test any relationship in, especially if someone's listening right now, is if your partner has the ability to be flexible and have a growth mindset. If there is consistent evidence that they can be flexible, and I'll tell you what that means in a minute, and a growth mindset, meaning they're constantly trying to evolve, they're trying to be better, they're going to lean into Paul, they're going to lean into Barb, and tell me more about your feelings. That's where the flexibility comes into play, because that means that I can hold the discomfort of feeling like you're giving me feedback about me and it feels prickly, but I can expand myself to hold that discomfort, to lean into what you're saying. I'm not going to shut down. I'm not going to, Darvo, we all know what Darvo means. I'm going to defend. I'm going to attack you, and then I'm going to reverse it. And next thing you know, you're defending, when you're the one that brought me the problem, right? That's hallmark of abusive relationship. But when you kind of think about flexibility, the person is not going to do that. They're like, well, I don't see it that way, Barb, but I really want to hear your point of view. Right. So they have flexibility, and a growth mindset means that, you know what? I'm getting a little upset right now, but I'm going to think about that, and let's come back tomorrow. I'm going to talk about it, right? So that also means they have a growth mindset, because they're not just shutting it down. They're going to lean in. So if your relationship has any of those things, there's flexibility and there's a lean into personal growth and personal responsibility, everything else pretty much, I believe, and I'm making a very broad sweep here, can be worked through.
Well, that's hope. That's a good way to, that's a good thought. That's a
good way to go out on a bang, right? A positive note.
That's positive. Absolutely.
People can change, but they have to be flexible, and they have to have accountability and self-reflection in order to take the journey of personal growth. 100%.
I heard a statement, which a perfect way is you can't change what you don't acknowledge.
There you go. 100%.
Yeah.
I'm endorsing it, Barb.
I was gonna say you got Dr. Janie's approval on this, so that means that see, look, Barb's already enlightened Dr. Janie. You gave her some wisdom. She's ready to go.
That's right. Give me the invitation to the wedding.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's ever happening again.
See, we always say that when we're unhealed. Hello.
All right. Okay.
Dr. Janie, where can people check out your work? Where can they follow you? Please let the people know where they can pop in and get some more of these little tidbits. I know you do a lot of them on your social media.
Yeah, absolutely. So the basic way is to find me on my website at www.janielacy.com, JANIELACY.com. And on all the social media, I'm drdrjanielacy.com.
You validated me. You enlightened me. You gave me positive things to look forward to.
We had therapy today.
Yes,
no, we really did. We really did. And I was like, you just validated that 15-year-old to 56-year-old woman that she
looks good.
Thank you.
Still got it going on.
And that means a lot. So I said I knew if anybody, including myself, my mom was going to get a lot out of this. So thank you for lending your voice and coming on here and joining us.
Thank you.
My pleasure. My pleasure. Bye-bye.
Wow.
Dr. Janie.
What a great episode.
That was one that I was like, if somebody is going to take something away from it, which I hope everybody does, I know you needed that one.
Yeah, great. I would love to talk to her as like my therapist.
I was going to say, girl, you thought this was a fucking private session for a minute. I said,
checks in the mail.
Yeah, no, literally. That was good, but that's something that I feel like everybody needs to hear. I mean, obviously being your son, I knew that meant a lot to you. And I do feel like you needed that validation of knowing that you're not crazy, you're not wrong, you're not the one that's caused it. You've done everything you can, and you even heard her. There are people who are just constantly going to just date from relationship, marriage, and just be toxic as hell, no care in the world, and they're going to keep going through life like that.
Yeah. And it's sad. I mean, we all know people who are in those relationships, and we try to give our best wisdom that we can, but I didn't want to hear it until I was ready. So I guess people aren't going to listen until they're ready or can't do it. But I mean, she did give those good pointers to the prior of doing it, which will then help not going back to it. You know what I mean? Like I said, I left for a year, went back.
Yeah.
She was not surprised.
I know. Well, that's why I was thinking you're like, oh, I did. I'm like, well, this is what she does for a living. She's going to know that you did that. Statistically, that's what it is.
Yeah. So, I mean, we hope this helps people. Like I said, we try to help friends or family that we see it, and sometimes you can see it from the outside, but it doesn't mean that person in it is going to see it, so it takes a lot to get to that point.
We've been to a point where, I mean, we've lived it to start. I mean, obviously very different things, but I've been in relationships where I was like, this is not it. Oh my God, this is terrible. And then you meet somebody like Jordy now, and it's like, oh my gosh, this is what I should have been. This was what. So that's why it's like shitty, because you have to go through those really unfortunate situations, but then it makes you very grateful and appreciative for what you do have when you have somebody who's healthy and you guys work on it and you apologize and you don't like want to hurt the other person and you're mindful of that. So I mean, it is
and I also think with you being younger, and younger people to go through that. I don't know if I stated my point when I was saying like to be older going through that. It's like by the you stay in it because you think, oh, I'm older, like this is it. I'm too old now, and then when you get out, I mean, I guess some people jump right back into things, but I personally couldn't do that. I really needed to work on myself and really get myself together. So then you're down the road years not doing it, you know what I mean? Not being in relationships. So it's very hard. I feel like older people and someone who was only in one relationship.
Yeah.
Versus multiple relationships, just sort of live, learn, and know what you don't want and do want.
I think you lived, learned a lot in that relationship. So, I mean, I think you took a lot out of it.
Yeah.
And this period of your in between where we're trying to, build you back up again, is that you got to do the self work. Like she said, you got to learn who you are. You got to understand yourself. So I think that's really a crucial part of that. And I think that's what you're
Yeah,
doing.
I agree.
Day by
Yeah.
day, baby, day by day.
It is.
And
It's
you
a
want that whole
tricky
episode
sport.
without trying to tell your age and I out at you at the end. Well, thank you everybody for listening to this week's episode of Hold On, I'm Calling My Mom podcast. As always, thank you for listening, tuning in, supporting, sharing. Please keep at it. Follow us on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook at Hold On, I'm Calling My Mom. Email us with any reviews or statements, comments. You want to just give us a shout out, tell us you love us, make us feel good during the week. Shoot us an email at Hold On, I'm Calling My Mom podcast at gmail.com. We need the validation. Subscribe to us on
For
YouTube.
real.
Subscribe to us on YouTube at Hold On, I'm Calling My Mom, and just keep on spreading the word. And
Keep it on.
Exactly. We love what we're doing, and we love the ones that are listening. So thank you again. We will catch you guys next Monday as we drop one once a week. So keep tapping in. Barb, hopefully you get this one right, but take it away.
All right. I'm hanging up now. Bye.
Yeah, she finally got it right. It only took, 2 months? We did it. Yes. Call you
Bye,
later.
all.
Love you. Bye.
Love you. Bye.